Okay, as for chapter 19, interpersonal skills, this really is talking about, managing relationships, right? How do you do a good job of thinking about all the different people that you have to work with and rely on to make your job as a coach successful. We a lot of times think about our players and our players first and foremost, which is most important to build good relationships with our players. But we also need to be thinking about the other people that we have to create good relationships with, communicate well with, be able to resolve conflicts between, support and advocate for, and have support and advocate for us. So it is really important that you do think about those interpersonal skills that are, strong interpersonal skills that are pretty much a requirement for coaches to be successful. And if this is an area of struggle for you, it might be something that you think about, as you are an assistant coach, to develop, and work on developing, because this is being able to communicate effectively and work with other people and a wide variety of people is critical in, the athletic world, right? Because you work with such a diverse group of people, and for some of you, you'll be in situations where the group you work with is even more diverse and dynamic. So it's important that you have strong, or you work really hard on having strong interpersonal skills. So you have to know yourself really well, be able to trust yourself. Um, you have to think about how you build trust with others, so that you have to show some vulnerability. I think that's hard for people to do, especially people who are in the coaching world. You don't want to show vulnerability. You don't want to show that you have, levels of sort of quote unquote weaknesses. I don't want to say that you are weak, but you have weaknesses that you're overcoming or working on. But that's disclosing yourself is an important way to build trust. So is being, honest. I think being honest is really important, and, that's a great way to build trust. And this is how you help create yourself as a coach of influence, is that you are reliable, you're trustworthy, you disclose and you're honest about who you are. So I think trying to build those relationships of, trust can help you be a positive influence, as well as thinking about what it takes to be a positive influence coach altogether. Of course, communicating effectively is a strong way to build good relationships. Listening is a really key component to communication, and I know we talked about communication back the first couple of weeks of the semester, and talked about some different strategies for communicating well. So that's always important to continue to work on, and to ask the question, am I communicating effectively with you? Do you feel like you're being, heard from me, by me? Those are good questions to ask to gauge how you're doing. And if the answers are no, you're not doing those things well, then to ask, what do you need from me, right? What will it take for you to feel like I'm communicating better, more effectively, and also listening or hearing you and doing a better job of listening to the needs of the athletes. It's also important to be able to accept and support other people, being open with people, letting them, being open with others, being open to them. Um, and of course, and you hear this more and more today, that coaching is caring. It's important that you think about how you care for the people that you coach, that you take care of as a coach, but also the people around you that support you, how you care for them as well. There's a section in this chapter that is this animal section, right? That gives you kind of an idea of what kind of animal you would be to resolve conflict. It's kind of akin to like a disc assessment, true colors, the 4 animal personality, assessment that maybe some of your coaches have put you through, because Gary, has done that with some teams, or he's done that with coaches, so coaches have passed it on to their team. But this is a good way to think about maybe how you resolve conflict. Are you an owl? Are you a fox? Are you a teddy bear? Are you a shark or a turtle? Do you sink back from conflict and not, not really want to deal with it and face it head on? Do you attack it, and just get at it? Are you someone who wants to just see everybody the best solution for most people? So you are someone who's sort of caring and loving in those situations. Are you a little more astute and you think about things more rationally? Are you sort of sly and make sure that you get what you want, and not really thinking so much about others' needs? There's lots of different ways to resolve conflict. So if you think about which one kind of fits your personality, you can understand how you see and look at conflict and how you might respond to it. It's also helpful for you to think about how how other people may respond to conflict and how that could be create a lot of friction for you. And if that's the case, how can you best work with understanding if you're a teddy bear and you come up against someone who's more of like a shark, how do you manage through that together to understand that? And I think there's just some good guidelines to think about when you have conflict. And I have that on a particular slide for you, and your book talks about it. It's really important to think about how you come to agreement about what the conflict is about. That you don't place blame on any one person, but everyone sort of takes part in how you're going to resolve the issue and how you all had a part in the issue in the first place. It's important to think about what the other person's perspective is. Like, what's their point of view? What is their take on what happened? And hearing their version of the story, because it may be very different from yours, which therein creates the conflict that you have to resolve in the first place in order to get to a baseline understanding. That makes it hard when you are thinking about it one way and see it from one point of view, and somebody else or the person that you feel like you have the issue with, the conflict with, sees it completely differently. So um, you want to make sure that you try to come to agreement what the conflict is about, see both perspectives, communicate effectively together by making sure that you're both motivated to resolve the conflict. Because you may find that there are times when the person you have conflict with doesn't necessarily care to resolve the conflict, and then that creates a whole different series of resolutions to manage. Um, but the sort of four little things that the book talks about is using desk to describe the situation, express your feelings, specify your wishes, and state the consequences. And so these things are very helpful if you think about how you can best resolve this is describe situation, express your feelings, specify your desired outcomes, and then the consequences, state the consequences if those things don't happen. And I give you kind of a little idea of how, like, what might be something that you deal with a player as a coach that you can look at in on the PowerPoint itself. And so with all this, and I said this at the top of this short video segment, is that your relationships are with more than just your athletes, right? Your coaches on staff, the coaches you coach against, the administrator that you coach for or that you report to, whether that's a high school AD or college AD, or it's like a youth commissioner or official of some kind that oversees and organizes the youth league that you're working in. There is some kind of um, up level up that you have to work with and communicate with effectively. There's also officials, there's parents, there's to some degree, depending on where you're coaching, media that you have to communicate with. And of course, the medical personnel, like, your certified athletic trainers, maybe any kind of physician you might have to work with in case of an injury, um, etc. Strength and conditioning, nutrition, those kinds of people. So, realize and recognize desk works in any situation. While the description or while the example I gave had to do with coach to athlete, you may have conflict with any number of these people or people in these areas, and it's important to think about when you do have conflict that you're able to come to an agreement what the conflict actually is, that you're both motivated to resolve the conflict, that you see other people's perspectives, and that you're able to just describe the situation, express your feelings, specify what you're hoping, um, what your wishes are, what the outcomes are going to be, and then you state the consequences if things aren't resolved. Um, so yeah, so I just wanted to touch on those different relationships that you will be managing, and that's another part of your assignment that you talk about, who and why it's important to think about managing these special relationships in your daily routine or your regular routine as a coach. Um, if you if you struggle with interpersonal skills like interpersonal relationships, it's something to definitely continue to work on and push and get better at. If you're someone who struggles with diversity, if you're someone who struggles with accepting people, you're gonna have to really work on those things, because as a coach, you need to be able to set aside your own personal, sort of your own personal viewpoint and be able to accept and work with a wide range of people. And developing your interpersonal skills will help you be able to do that most effectively. So you'll be able to think about that as you're working through the assignment, this that you have due for next week, and also have had a chance to reflect about it on the reflection questions from chapter 19.